Thank you so much for tuning into the Indie Bracket, the web show where we interview independent creatives. I want to thank you for tuning into our first official interview, and I hope you all enjoy. Peace. Today's guest is, you might know her by her popular Instagram handle, Nice Meow, or her rapidly going YouTube channel. So today I'm introducing Radhia Rahman.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm great. It's a little bit of a gloomy day, but it's nice when you're working from home. It's a little cozy. I have the heater going.
Yeah. How's the scene in New York City?
The scene?
Yeah. Like,
Um, it's a little rough in terms of, we're still in the middle of a pandemic. People are good about wearing masks, but it's very hard to social distance, especially if you're commuting,
mhm.
especially during rush hour. But overall, nothing too threatening or scary. It's just people trying to get back to normality with some, conditions.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to start off with just a simple question just to start everything off. What does creativity mean to you?
Honestly, creativity is just what's truly in you.
Mhm.
So a lot of unapologetic creating, making what's
Yeah.
true and what's honest to you. Because the worst way to stunt your creativity is to force your hand, either because you feel like what you're making isn't working, or you feel like you need to be making a certain body of work by observing other people.
Yeah.
So creativity is really about that like gut feeling of this is something that I'm going to do and I'm going to execute it from start to finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you feel, like you talked about, that gut feeling? How do you feel in your work, especially like your illustration and your graphic design? How do you feel you show your identity throughout your own work?
Oh, for sure, through just my experience. So when people ask me where I find inspiration, I wouldn't necessarily call it inspiration, but at the same time, I would. It would just be from my memories, my experiences, my look on the world as a woman of color, as someone who
Hmm.
is queer, and just the development of finding myself throughout time, which will always continue to change,
Yeah.
and the duality of being a first generation American,
Yeah.
being raised in the city. I have never left the US, so I've never been to, my parents are from Bangladesh, so I've never been to, the motherland.
Yeah.
And it was only until the very beginning of this year that I got on a plane to the West Coast. I went to California, so there's a lot of exploring to do.
Mhm.
And I believe, even though I make cute illustrations, there are some where I'm back in touch with, I know my language. I'm very fluent in Bengali. I just don't know how to read or write it. But exploring that area where I feel like a lot of first generation Americans are either they're not taught or they're very integrated, which isn't a problem, but I think it's so valuable that because I have this culture to hold on to, I want it to continue to live with me in my lifestyle and also in my work.
Mhm. That was that was amazing. So do you feel, because you mentioned earlier, pandemic, everything going on, do you feel it's been harder to kind of push out more work as your brand is growing more?
Honestly, I think the pandemic, it was positive and negative. Obviously, I'm very grateful that no one that I know personally is sick or passed away from COVID. But because of that, a lot of people had to either, like, I lost my job, my part-time job, in the middle of the pandemic. So I stopped going to work and my father stopped going to work. So everyone was kind of compiled in this house. I live with my family.
Yeah.
And it's a 2 bedroom. So lots of commotion. It's very difficult to work. I was finishing up my last semester of college. So obviously I had to like go down and be like, shh, I'm in a class. Um, and it was a thing of space,
Mhm.
because right now, like my room is divided exactly in half. Desk on this side, storage stuff for my art supplies and my shop stock here,
Yeah.
and then wardrobe because I don't have an indoor closet, and my bed. Like I have more like supplies than I do personal belongings, and at this
Yeah.
point, I kind of am in an office with a bed.
Mhm.
So I think the space constriction and the lack of having a dedicated space where I'm able to focus was the only challenge.
Mhm.
And obviously, definitely feeling challenged when the Black Lives Matter movement gained momentum. I've been in that throughout high school,
Yeah.
and right now I think that was also something that, it brought up a lot of pain. Like, I'm not Black, but I'm still someone who is a person of color. So I experience racism in the same aspect. So to have to work through that and having those feelings arise was also another challenge that came with trying to stay creative when it feels like the world's on fire.
Yeah, and through that, speaking about how even with all the outside forces happening, especially this year in 2020, what has like helped you motivate you like to keep pushing out things and projects even through everything going on?
Definitely seeing other people make artwork. When you see successful figures,
Yeah.
If we don't have those people, if we don't have people that look like us in the industry, it makes things seem very scary and unattainable. You don't even want to kind of put your foot through the door.
Yeah.
And a huge help was the internet. We were stuck at home, so all of our attention is really just focused on the internet and social media and seeing what people are up to, even when we can't kind of congregate outside of our homes. Looking into YouTube was a great resource. YouTube always has just so many people from across the globe, so many different creators and artists, just people, So I grab inspiration from people who have uploaded studio vlogs and looking at illustrators who just work from home. Like, the whole concept of working from home is such a great privilege.
Yeah.
So it feels a little weird because when I look at my parents, they've always worked, labor jobs, 9 to 5, leaving the house, commuting, going to work. So it's very nice that I'm able to do that. So that inspiration mainly just came from looking at other people, observing other people's lives, observing other illustrators, and especially my professors who are in the field of illustration. So not only do they teach, but they also are in this field for many, many years to see that it's possible. And if they can do it, I can too.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel what school do you attend right now?
I graduated in May over Zoom, actually, but I went to the School of Visual Arts, which is in Manhattan, and I was there from 2016 to 2020, and I have my bachelor's fine arts degree in illustration.
Do you think your art has evolved a lot going through those 4 years at that school?
Oh, absolutely. I was actually taking a look at the portfolio I sent when I applied to SVA, and I was like, oh God, this is garbage. Like, what was I thinking? But at the moment, that was my best body of work.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing where when I had to submit my graduating portfolio for SVA, I looked at it and I was like, I know this is going to change, but it wasn't scary because art is meant to change the same way when your favorite band puts out an album and you're like, ooh, this doesn't sound the way it is. But that's because their music evolves, and in the same way, artwork evolves too, just as the artists themselves.
Yeah. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about was you've been a very vocal activist for mental health and just social justice on social media for even before 2020. So I wanted to ask, do you think as a creative and an influencer, do you think it's important to bring up these issues like in the public?
I think that if you are comfortable, yes. I know that a lot of people will avoid talking about politics or race because they're afraid they might lose followers. But honestly, that doesn't affect me because I want to create a genuine following. I don't want people to follow me who have opinions that go against my moral beliefs.
Right.
And, I'm vocal about it because, like, at the end of the day, you can be someone who has the complete opposite opinions of me, but still enjoy my work. It's more so if you really just hate the kind of person I am, I don't think I want that kind of negativity upon this community that I create. Like, I always tell people, my friends are like, oh, she's famous now. And I'm like, relax, because I'm still the person I was at the start of the year. So obviously things have changed. But I care more about a sense of community and creating a safe space, not only between myself and my followers, but between my followers as well. So to be vocal about, by the way, like, here are the things that I agree with, here are the things that I don't disagree with. You can feel free to unfollow, especially with this election. I was just like, if you are truly a Trump supporter, my artwork is not for you. The things that he agrees with completely just goes against my values, my lifestyle, and the work that I produce that revolves around my experience. And I was just like, you know what, feel free to unfollow. Like, it's not going to hurt my feelings. I would rather have a true community rather than a couple of outliers that are just going to freak out when they're like, you're being too political. Or especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, where people were like treating it politically, but in reality, it's about human rights. Like, I think there's this jump to politicize everything, but at the core, it's more of this shield of, you're afraid of a certain group of people, so you mask it as a political issue. Yeah.
And I think focusing a little bit more on, creating that personal connection you were talking about with you, and you want a true following. Do you think when you talk about mental health or some of the issues you were talking about earlier, do you think even now during the pandemic, do you think you've been struggling with those? Like, do you tend to speak from experience when you mentioned how to deal with these issues, or even dealing with positive mental health?
I think on the topic of mental health, I have had a very long journey when it came to addressing that I might have some, I don't want to use the word issues because then we're starting to label and kind of put it in a negative cloud. But, I am someone who at the start of college had a huge depressive episode, very, very dark place to come out of. And, I had a friend who, her name's Emma, she helped me through that. And it was a moment in my life where my connection with friends kind of got severed from high school. I was going through a lot. And just to have one person to be like, I'm here for you, and to teach me how to love myself is so valuable. So I've been seeing my therapist for almost 3 years now. And that's been a great change because I have never, I've never talked to someone confidentially. And I come from a background where mental health is not taken seriously, or the idea of a therapist is not normalized, or even taking medication, which I used to do. Thankfully, I'm doing way better. I'm not on any type of medication, but I still have things like anxiety, anxiety, panic attacks. And I've learned to handle that because those things it's not like a physical ailment that you get medicine, or you can put a cast on it and then it'll heal after 3 weeks or something. It's something to train yourself to cope with. And so right now, I think people are in a very vulnerable state because we're kind of just sitting with ourselves and letting these feelings brew. And we assess our relationships with other people, our relationship with ourselves, and we're having all this alone time, or we're kind of being forced to spend more time with people that we're sharing under the same roof. So mental health is definitely something that needs to take into account just as a person and also as an artist. So I don't know if there are any resources for people to get mental health counseling through Zoom, like especially now, because there have been many people who have started that because, so many feelings come up when you have to sit down and think about things. A lot of things that we weren't even conscious of. And especially for a lot of my Black followers, the kind of pain that comes up, a lot of repressed things, because it's like racism isn't anything new. That thing has existed for years and years, and we experience it in different ways. So knowing, being there for a friend, being there for yourself, kind of giving yourself days off, giving yourself a break, very important things, because self-care can be executed in many different ways. It's not just taking a bubble bath. Sometimes it could just be taking a day off and reading a book or watching your favorite show with a loved one. Yeah.
And do you think, because you're a person that now with your following that people are always, whatever you post or whatever you make, people always have an eye on it. Do you think the creative industry in itself has really had an effect on your mental health?
I would say yes, but also no, because I hope that a massive following or attention never changes who I am at the core. Because, attention can change people. And I've seen my own friends where attention has changed them. And it makes me a little sad because I'm just like, hey, by the way, do you remember who I am? Like your friend in real life for like 8 years, So in terms of the creative industry, I think there can be pressure. Now I have not just 200 people looking at my Instagram stories. I have almost 2,000 people looking at my Instagram stories. So obviously I want to make sure that it's precise. It's with brevity. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, I think there's this concept of, oh no, now so many people are watching, it needs to be perfect. Like, honestly, it's Instagram. Like, what needs to be close to perfect is my website, which clients see in terms of what kind of work I do. And Instagram is kind of just like the chill, safe space where you can just like kick back and have a good time with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think when you first like found out this is what I want to do, graphic design and illustration, do you think what kind of impact do you think that had in your life?
Oh, yeah. So I knew actually I didn't know. I always was creative since I was younger. I was a very crafty person. So my hobby still lies in like playing with like clay and knitting and like just sticking gemstones on things.
Yeah.
Fun. But when it came to high school, especially, so I went to Fiorello LaGuardia, which is an arts high school in Manhattan. It's like the fame school, but I went into there for visual art. But in middle school is when I started to kind of consolidate like who I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. And I think applying to that high school definitely started to like clear out that fork in the road. And when applying to college, I was like, what kind of art do I want to make? And I hear the word illustration, and I was like, because I don't have artist parents. I don't have people. Well, I did have friends who, you know, knew exactly what they wanted to do, but it's through the guidance of their parents, or their parents put them into something where they figured it out far earlier than I did. And I was just like, illustration seems like the exact thing I want to do, telling a narrative with images. Yeah. And it's a very broad area. I thought about fine art, but I honestly don't like oil painting. I don't like, you know, those like big gallery I think people can do it. People can execute it. It was just not my thing. But I also think that illustration can be fine art. And that's why I did it. I was just like, there aren't really any boundaries. You know, illustrators can also work with animators in terms of storyboarding, in terms of color, the backgrounds and whatnot, you know? Yeah. So it's a very flexible and versatile area. And I was just like, I need flexible and versatile. And once I got into college, then I started to figure out what kind of illustration I wanted to do, commercial or children's book, surface design. And I was like, I can do all of it. You know, I can do all of it. Yeah.
Do you think, because I know you did the partnership with Skull Candy, actually, do you think with illustration, do you think you'd ever break off into any other industries with your creative focus?
Well, the thing with Skull Candy is that I provided the illustrations. So they had an animation team kind of pull my work apart and animate it. And they did a really great job at that. Yeah. I would love to animate. You know, when I was younger, cartoons were a huge influence. I always wanted to animate, but I don't have the patience to. Like on Instagram, as far as I can go is making GIFs, and that takes like several hours. That's my cap, and realistically, that's as much as I can get done. But I think I would love, you know, I have several goals in mind. I would love to work on some kind of animated series, whether it's I don't think it would be to the extent of my idea or manuscript, but I also enjoy writing. So there was a children's book I was working on for a class, and I wrote the manuscript. It was kind of an original idea of mine, and I would love to have something published. I think as someone who's just starting, people will usually hand you a manuscript and be like, we like your art. Yeah. Do the manuscript. But to have something self-published, one of my experiences, especially as someone who is a brown girl, having a book revolve around that. Because when I was 12, I was a little like alternative brown girl. And I think there were others too, but at the moment it felt like I was the only person in the world, and it felt very scary and daunting. So there's a lot of things I want to get done that just go outside of one image, you know, like with the Skull Candy thing, it was like several images and like moving stuff and things on t-shirts and skateboards. So yeah.
So do you think more focus now on like more short-term growth for 2021, do you think, what are your goals for next year regarding, either art or for your personal
Ooh.
life?
Okay, so for my art, I definitely want to make a Patreon. Like you might know what a Patreon is. It's
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
a platform where people can, sign up for different tiers, and
Mhm.
it's basically like offering your money in exchange for extra content.
Yeah.
So that's something that I really want to do. I want to be able to do live streams, but in order to do that, I need peace and silence. And in order to have peace and silence, I need to move out. So big goal of mine is to either get a studio or find a spacious apartment, maybe a 2 bedroom where I can as long as I can close the door on work, that's all I need.
Yeah.
So it's a big jump because I've lived with my family. I've never dormed either, so it's going to be a little scary and daunting, but very exciting to even be able to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So moving out, starting a Patreon, like making bigger moves is essentially the goal for 2021.
And in your goals, not even for next year, just like long term, how do you see your channel growing also?
Ooh, so I always look up to, you might know her as Franner. Her name is Fran Meneses. She's a Chilean illustrator. She lives in Brooklyn now, but she's, I think, in her early 30s, but she's been
Hmm.
illustrating for many, many years. And I always see her as this motherly figure in the art
Yeah.
community. And honestly, that's the goal. I want to be that figure of safety
Hmm.
where when people younger than me are like, my parents don't believe in me, I'm like, but I do, you know?
Yeah.
You should believe in yourself. Here's the steps you can take to kind of battle
Hmm.
that negativity, and find your way throughout life. Even if you don't do art, like I feel like there are so many other areas where people are like, I don't know if I should do this thing, and I'm like, you're not going to know unless you try, And if you
Right.
fail, that's fine. The whole
Yeah.
point of learning is to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. And I've definitely learned from many mistakes, but that's kind of where I see my YouTube channel. I only post what I feel comfortable with. I only share aspects of my life that I feel comfortable with. So there's never any pressure of like, oh, I need to do this thing, because the followers that I have are very patient. My vlog that I'm editing right now is almost an hour and 30 minutes long, but so many people are like, I'm so ready. And I'm like, you're
Yeah.
going to watch a vlog that's an hour and 30 minutes long?
Your last one was around like 40 minutes, right?
It was 52 minutes and it got over 200,000 views. And I'm like, what? What? Like, okay. I
Yeah.
enjoy really long vlogs. I think it's very cozy.
Hmm.
And even if I don't have the time, I'll even go back to it and just pick up where I left off. It's just fun. And this one has more talking in it. So
Hmm.
it's less captions and more so you can listen to it in the background, have a little friend,
Yeah.
be me. Yeah.
And on the reciprocal, the last question, how do you see your biggest fears for the next year heading into 2021?
My greatest fear has always been money. That's really it's what it
Yeah.
is. I oof. So next month, my student loan repayment begins, and I don't come from generational wealth. I'm very transparent of like my money situation.
Yeah.
Obviously, opening a store has drastically changed that. I'm not rich or anything, but I'm able to have a sense of a
Mhm.
nicer income than just having a part-time job.
Yeah.
And I'm figuring out like where I want those streams of income to happen. But I didn't come from any generational wealth. My parents are immigrants, so
Yeah.
hustle of coming to America and kind of starting from absolutely nothing
Mhm.
is difficult. So there's not much reliance I can have in terms of my family financially supporting me. I went to school entirely on loans. So for the next 10 years, I have the pleasure of paying off $100,000, which I think, is most cases for people who
Yeah.
study in America,
Mhm.
especially when you go to a private art college or even like med school. Like it's rough. So it's a fear where I'm like, if I miss a month, like will the government show up at my door? I don't know. And considering moving out, like having those expenses shift around, figuring out taxes, because I'm not self-employed yet, because I've been on unemployment since I lost my job. But
Yeah.
at the same time, having kind of this small business on the side, how that affects my money. And when you're self-employed, you get really heavily taxed, which kind of sucks because it's
Yeah.
like why are artists being taxed so heavily but not billionaires, you know?
Yeah.
And figuring those things out, also figuring out things with my partner who we're planning to move together. So also allowing space for another person in your life is a huge change too. Because I believe I can operate by myself, and I have a hard time like letting other people do things for me, or allowing other people do things for me, or even just, you know, being like, hey, let's help me with the shop stuff. And I'll be like, oh, it needs to be done this way. So learning just to like exist with other people. So that's something I need to like figure out. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, so we have our final question. So for younger generations, people coming after you, watching your videos or viewing your art, what advice would you give them for breaking into the industry?
Definitely do what you can control. You know, accomplish what's in your control, because I know when I was in middle school, there were so many people like, how do your parents let you do that? How do your parents let you dye your hair? And I'm like, I don't know, man. This is what I can do, you know? And obviously, whatever restrictions you have, if it's going to be in harm's way, or if it's going to cause your family to disown you, obviously maybe not do that. Do what's in your control until you have independence of yourself, until you can sit down and have a conversation with the people who you're with, or even just with yourself, and be like, what am I going to do? You know? And I think people feel this rush because it's like, you go to middle school, you go to high school, right at high school, you go to college. And that's the really shaky period of your life where you're like, I need to figure everything out. Otherwise, it's all going to go downhill from here. But you don't, you know, if you need to take a gap year, take a gap year. If you don't want to go to college, depending on what you want to do, there are people that I know who are artists that never went to art school, or they went to art school and dropped out, but they're successful now. And there's this concept of, if you have a college degree, then you're better than everyone. And that's not true. I got a college degree because that's something that I wanted to do. And I'm the first person in my family to get a college degree. So do what's in your control, listen to your gut feelings, even if it sounds weird. Like in the vlog, I explained how I got the Skull Candy project by declining one of a full-time job that was offered to me. And if I took on that full-time job, I wouldn't have made those YouTube videos. I wouldn't have been in the creative space, because I would have been pulled away with something else. So listen to your gut feelings, surround yourself with positive people. When you're young, there's so many toxic people that, you know, you feel like you need, or it's hard to cut off. But as you get throughout life, you'll realize that your social circle becomes smaller and smaller, but those people that you choose to have by your side are going to be people that you want to keep connections with forever. And that's just general life advice. Find your voice, whatever it may be.
Do you think that, sorry, so I know this is the last question, but do you think that helps you determine those risks? You know, you talked about turning down that full-time job for the Skull Candy. Do you think just listening to your gut helps you determine what risks to take?
So it was a full-time job. So as you know what an agent is, right? So my professor, Yuko Shimizu, she's an amazing Japanese illustrator, and her agent was looking for a junior agent, so someone who handles the business aspect for talent management and illustrators. And it was a full-time job offered by her agent, Erin, and it was a lot of time and dedication, but the money was looking good. And I was just like, if I say no, I'm turning down money, which I need. But I'm also assessing that I need time. And this was right as I was about to launch my shop. So I was just like, I don't know if I can dedicate the time. And it also, if it's a full-time job, it's a responsibility too. So I can't just be like, 1 month in, this isn't working. So I had to decline, but I was like, let's keep in touch. And he was just like, I completely understand. And a week later, he was like, I have this project with Skull Candy. Do you want to take it? And I was like, yes. Yes. So you never know, by making a nervous decision or declining things, what can come your way. Because at the end of the day, like, time is valuable. You know, money is important, but there's good money and there's bad money, and too much money and too little money. You know? So yeah, sometimes you have to turn down things for better things to come your way. Things take time.
Wonderful, wonderful life advice. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for first let the people know where they can find you and if you have any projects coming up.
Um, well, you can find me on my YouTube channel. It's just my name, Radhia Rahman. I have an Instagram. It's Knives Meow. I also have a TikTok. It's also Radhia Rahman. I don't really use it. It was just for fun.
Yeah.
Um, I also have a Ko-fi where if you, my shop is on my website.
Hmm.
I have a Ko-fi. Some people have been like, oh, like I'm too young to buy from your store, or like I can't have things shipped to me, or
Yeah.
they're like, my country's shipping platform has like closed down. So I'm like, oh, well, I have this thing called Ko-fi where you can just leave a little tip for the price of a coffee, and people have done that.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of social media outreach.
Hmm.
So wherever you want to follow me, wherever you want to put that attention, you know.
Thank you all for watching. I just want to thank my guest again, Roddy, for being so open and transparent with me throughout the entire conversation. And make sure to subscribe to the Indie Bracket on YouTube and follow us on Instagram at the Indie Bracket. And you all have a good one.